when you start a business, your perspective will change because all of a sudden the government's involved in, hold on, I got a payroll tax and then I got this, I got, what's this Medicare thing? I got the 401k, now there's regulation here. And then if you're not starting a business, I challenge, none of you guys have kids. I don't have kids right now too, but I mean, I'm a little bit older than you guys. Once you have kids and your concern is no longer about yourself and it's about others, I assume that also makes you sort of shift your mindset.
100%.
Well, of course, and also you realize when you start making money, you start realizing, boy, if I keep more of my money, it's not that people then just hoard that money forever and do nothing with it. That would be within your right, and obviously some people do that, but most people, when they get more money, and I know plenty of rich people, they spend a ton of money. They
spend or give,
wealth.
or donate, all these things that you want with a kind heart. We're able to do that.
And even if it's not even if it's purely for yourself.
Sure,
so Bernie always goes after, a million, well, he used to go after billionaires or millionaires, then it became billionaires and 1%, except 1%, you're in the 1% if you make 400 grand a year, which actually is not a tremendous amount of money in the world that we live in. But they always go after people with yachts. And it's like, you know how many people you have to employ to build a yacht, to take care of a yacht, that are going to work at the shipyard and everything else? So you've thus created all of these other jobs. You could be a billionaire and have the most ridiculously large house that clearly you don't need to survive, but you're hiring tons of housekeepers and you're hiring tons of staff and people and security and all of these other things. So I would try maybe a good thought game would be Bernie Sanders. I assume you think he's a pretty good guy, or like
in general,
pretty good, right? Give me something that he's ever accomplished.
What do you mean? He was like one of the first. I don't know if he was a senator at this point, but basically like one of the, I think like representatives, senators, whatever, fighting for civil rights when he was like in his like early 20s. There's like videos of him or like pictures of him basically advocating for that. And I think to have that foresight and being willing to like stand up for like civil justice and inequality and then go on to have a career in politics, like with that foresight, I think that's something important.
So he hasn't done anything since the 60s?
No, I think since then he's brought into like national attention, conversations about like $15 minimum wage, the ideas of like Medicare for all. He made it mainstream. Same thing with the idea of free public tuition, college. I think being able to bring those to like the forefront of Americans' minds and being able to actually have a conversation leads us to the direction that I personally think is better for society.
So I think, I'm not trying to be a dick here, I think we sort of debunked several of those things. But if the argument is that 50 years ago he was on the front lines of marching for equality when there actually were laws that black people couldn't do this or that, or Jim Crow laws or something like that, well, as a liberal, you should be for equality under the law. So of course that's just. But I would say in the 50 years, basically, that he's been a senator, there's a reason you can't think of anything he's accomplished.
I can think of something.
He's accomplished nothing other than he did become a millionaire and he owns 3 houses. But he's never passed a piece of legislation with his name on it. I think maybe one about 30 years ago, something about sanitation in New Hampshire. But he actually has done something very dangerous in America, which is teach people that envy and that greed and that wanting what other people have so you can do what you want with it is good. And that, I think, is deeply dangerous. But I would love to hear what else he's done.
What else has Bernie done? What has he accomplished?
Something that's important to look at when you look at a politician's record isn't just what they voted for, but what they voted against. And Bernie Sanders voted against the Iraq War. And I think his entire approach to American foreign policy, not being quite so hawkish or being interventionist, is something that I, as a young person, like personally. And yeah, Bernie Sanders is a millionaire, but that's not an issue to me. I don't have any issue with people having like personal prosperity or wealth like that. And he made the majority of that money off royalties from his book, Our Revolution. So I just see that as him profiting off of his innovation and creativity. I don't see that.
Ironic is what it is.
How?
Well, he certainly doesn't need 3 houses. He could definitely lend out some of those rooms to some of the illegals.
No, but he's anti-capitalism, and that's what made him wealthy.
Yeah.
Well, she does. You got to give her credit due. If he did in fact vote against the Iraq War, I would assume we all agree that was a shit show of all shit shows, especially Afghanistan. But okay, that's on Bush. But one thing about Bernie, remember when he was on Bill Maher, and you've been on Bill Maher before, multiple on the Real Time and also on the Club Random.
Oh, this clip you're going to reference is one of my favorite moments in television.
Is this the equality versus the equity one?
Yeah, it's one of the most incredible
Rubin, please explain this, because it stumped him, and I go, I guess equality, equity.
Is there a way we can play it? Is there a way
if we can, our friend Umberto's
maybe I'll try
on
to do it in like 30
but
seconds.
But the whole DEI perspective, diversity, equity, inclusion, I would say that he's the OG,
Right.
the grand wizard of the squad of the AOCs and the Presleys and the Rashida Tlaibs.
Right, but the beauty is the revolution eats its own. So he will be eaten. You can feel he's not even that relevant anymore. He will be eaten by it.
Showed up to the
but there was a beautiful
in
moment.
a mask.
This was what, about 6 months ago. He's on Real Time with Bill Maher, and Bill Maher asks him. Bill Maher, who's a liberal, a true liberal, and always has been, asks him the difference between equity and equality.
Right.
So before I explain any further, would maybe either one of you want to explain what the difference is, because that's the basic idea of progressivism.
Go ahead, Aaron. The difference between equality and equity.
I would say equality people typically associate with like homogeneity, everything being the same for the most part.
When you use words like homogeneity, nobody knows what.
Do you mean like equality of outcome?
Yes.
Like the outcome is
No,
the same?
it's something like what Dave was saying, like equality under the law is something that I think every American is entitled to as per the Constitution. Equity is actually kind of like a Marxist idea, right? But from each according to one's ability to each according to one's need, where you address inequality by specifically tailoring it to each individual person's need, rather than trying to have like blanket approaches that might have some people falling through the cracks or elevating people more than they actually needed to be. So I think that's kind of the difference between equity and equality.
It's where you start to where you
explained it
end.
better than Bernie did, because Bernie didn't know the answer. Bernie literally said, "I don't know," when Bill said, "What's the difference between equality and equity?" And it actually should have ended Bernie's, I would say, largely fraudulent career right there, because he's pushed the ideas, the Marxist ideas of equity on America, that we should take from some and give to others so that we all end up in the same place. Which, again, you have to kill an awful lot of people and take from all of the creators so that we all end up in the same place. And by the way, they never actually end up in the same place because there's always a communist class that lives at the top that's going to eat all their foie gras while everybody else eats bugs. But Bernie did not know how to answer it, and Bill desperately tried not to own him in that moment, but he basically did, and that should have been one of the moments where people are like, wow, this guy is just a fraud. You know, there was also a moment where Ibram Kendi, you know, who wrote which one is it, a Racist Baby?
Anti-Racist Baby.
Anti-Racist Baby. It's Racist Baby, actually, but he thought that his son, for a few days, his like 6-year-old son was coming home thinking that maybe he was a girl. And he's on camera saying how horrible that was. And it's like, well, wait a minute. I thought you were Mr. Equity and you're Mr. Trans Rights. So every time push comes to shove with these people, they fold very quickly, sort of like a wet paper bag. And that's Bernie not knowing the literal definition, basically, of communism versus capitalism, or Mr. Woke being upset when his son suddenly is going to be his daughter.
And if you even look at the sanctuary city analogy, it's like we've seen Texas and the border states crying out loud for years. This is insane. Millions and millions of people. But once a couple buses show up at Martha's Vineyard, or a couple 100,000 people, God forbid, tens of thousands of people show up in New York City, Eric Adams, we can't take this anymore. So it's like the wall thing, right? Build a wall, walls are racist. We all fell for that in 2016. All of a sudden, Nancy Pelosi, you got a wall around your house, baby girl. Like, what's going on here? You've got gunned protectors, security around you, but you're against guns. So it's like, what's the famous phrase? It's like, not for me,
Rules
but for thee.
not
What's the whole situation?
Yeah.
Do you have that clip of Bernie Sanders?
Yeah, obviously.
Can we play it?
Yep.
Okay, this is Bernie Sanders, who's been pushing for DEI, not knowing the difference between equality and equity.
And it's not the same word, and confusing equality of opportunity with trying to guarantee equity in outcomes. Okay, that's interesting, because I think this word equity has come into the language in the last few years, and before that we didn't hear it a lot. And I think a lot of people hear equity and they hear equality. That like it's the same word, and it's not the same word and the same concept. So how would you differentiate between equity and equality?
Well, equality, we talk about, I don't know what the answer is. Come to think of it, you know, equality is equality of opportunity. All right? We live in a society, we want all people to have whatever color your skin is.
Equity, I think, is more guarantee of outcome, is it not?
I think so.
Yeah, I'll take that. I'll take that.
Yeah,
for a
thanks,
thousand.
Bill. Thanks.
Gotcha.
I don't know what I'm doing
Thank you,
here. What
Bernie.
about
Equality.
Equality.
Yeah.
Okay. So everything he's been pushing with
like
DEI
they should have
is actually
taken him out
equality.
back and shot him
Yeah.
right after that. Like what an absolutely fraudulent life you've lived. You don't know the basics about what you have. He has thrust this nonsense on America, and when asked the most basic thing, Like the most basic thing. What's the difference between air and water? He does not know. And Bill is trying not to embarrass him there.
Well, when it comes to equality and equity, you know, I don't need to Google this, I don't research. We're supposed to be living in a colorblind society. MLK, the famous speech, I have a dream, all our children can be and live in a society where it doesn't matter about the color of your skin or the content of your characters, what it's all about. But equity, and the DEI, it's all about the color of your skin, your sexual orientation, what group you fit in, your identity politics. So it's sort of backwards. Whoa, whoa, whoa. If you like that one, click right here to watch the full SOSCAST. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel.